My name is Paige, and I'm a Senior Operations Coordinator for IBC. Welcome to today's webinar, Proving the Business Impact of Employee Communications. Thank you to our sponsor, Haiilo, for hosting this webinar with IBC. Our speakers today are Keela from Haiilo and Sharon with Gallagher. Before we get started, I would like to share a few reminders. During the presentation, all participants will be in a listen-only mode, and throughout the presentation, please feel free to submit questions in the Q&A box in your Zoom toolbar. Our presenters will address these questions at the end of the presentation. If you experience any technical issues, please let me know in the chat box and I can help you troubleshoot the issue. And finally, a recording of this presentation will be available on IABC Advanced this week. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Keela.
Thanks so much, Paige. Sharon, should we get the slides up?
Yeah, let's get started.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Welcome. Let us know in the chat where you're joining us from. We appreciate you all taking the morning or the afternoon to chat with us for a bit. So our webinar today is titled Measuring the Business Impact of Employee Communications. My name is Keela Flores. I'm the Senior Field Marketing Manager here at Haiilo, and I'm joined by Sharon. So who we are and why we've partnered on this very interesting research study that we did. Haiilo, specifically, we are an employee communications platform that allows you to create meaningful dialogue and connecting your people to purpose. We have more than 1,000 global companies that trust the employee communications within one secure platform that 3.5 million people love to use every day. So Sharon, can you dive in and tell us a little bit about yourself and Gallagher?
Yeah, certainly. So Gallagher Communication is a full-service specialist employee communication agency. So we do everything from helping people communicate about reward and benefits to change communication through to setting up your internal comms strategy, audits, all of the above. But if you haven't heard of Gallagher, you may have heard of Gallagher's State of the Sector study. So every year we pull together the sort of definitive internal comms trends report, and we've just closed our survey for the 2024 report. So we heard from 2,301 internal communicators all over the globe, and the report will be out in February. But as we go through today, because we're talking about measurement, because we love data, we'll be sharing some of those findings to you exclusively. And of course, that brings us to our mission alignment. So obviously, Haiilo is all about employee communications. Gallagher is all about employee communications, but we love data, we love measurement, and we love sort of proving the value and the business impact of those communications. So we came together to put together a bit of a study, didn't we, Keela?
Yeah. Found some really interesting data around it too. So yeah, in continuing with our shared mission, we wanted to dive into the measurement gap that exists in internal communications and try to better understand why measuring the effectiveness of internal communications is such a challenging endeavor. This survey aimed to explore the extent of time and effort spent on measurement, identify the associated challenges, and suggest potential solutions. We found that many respondents expressed a strong desire to enhance their measurement practices. People also told us that they wanted measurement to be easier, automated, aligned with business goals, and recognized and supported by senior leadership. But there was a wide gap between how people wanted to measure and what they were able to do. Some key considerations that we found from survey respondents was if you're looking to enhance your measurement practices, to consider the attitudes towards measurement, the barriers to effective measurement within your organization, the frequency of reporting, along with how much time you're spending per each report, which was quite astonishing, and proving effectiveness and the value of your work to senior leadership. So the first key point that we explored was the importance versus implementation. And when we looked into this further, we discovered that 97% of people who think measurement is quite or very important don't formally measure their internal communications. And the majority of responders took 3 to 5 hours to complete their reports. Sharon, given these findings, if measurement's so important, why aren't we doing more of it?
I know it's such a huge gap, right? And when we look at the data here, obviously the most popular kind of measurement time frame was at 1 to 3 hours, but the people who found it sort of the most important were measuring for over 10 hours. So quite, a large disparity. But, there's definitely this gap between what we want to do and what we're actually doing. And I think personally, as communicators, we know that measurement matters, right? We know that that's how we prove our value. And in our state of the sector findings, the survey that's just closed, 1 in 4 respondents said that improving impact measurement and evaluation was one of their top 3 priorities for the year ahead. So it's quite up there. A quarter of people are saying they want to be better at measurement, but professionally, we're really being held back. So it seems that kind of that measurement is really this one thing that stumps us. So as a function, we're constantly being asked to do more with less. And when you're always on the go, taking that time, particularly 3 to 5 hours or even up to 10 hours of it, to stop and measure your effectiveness can really fall to the bottom of the to-do list. So there's just so many things that you can measure. It really can kind of be like analysis paralysis, right? You're not sure where to start, so you just don't start at all. And we know there's so many challenges, and that's one of the things that we asked about in the report, isn't it, Keela?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that analysis paralysis. So the next thing that we looked at was kind of those challenges in measurement. So, the importance of measuring impact and success of employee comms, but the challenge of getting around that, right? So we found that 30% of people say that measurement's very important, but didn't formally report because of a lack of resource or even time. We also found the difficulty in attributing standard metrics directly to communication as quite common. Sharon, what do you think is stopping from us from effectively measuring? If we know it's important, how do we get around that?
Yeah, those top challenges, and like a lot of those are backed up by our state of the sector data. So this is a question we ask every year, and that is sort of like, what are the barriers to measuring your impact? And of course, classic, the age-old time and resource, that was the #1 challenge. So over half of our respondents this year said that a lack of time and resource was a challenge for measuring. That was closely followed by technology in the #2 and #3 spots. So 40% of people said that they were lacking the metrics, the technology metrics, and 38% said that their technology sort of was lacking the tools to collate and analyze data. So there's this huge gap with our tech and tools is sort of not doing what we want it to do. And, funnily enough, if you were to solve challenge 3, which was maybe investing some money in the tools to collate and analyze the data, you'd also solve #1, which is saving you that time and resource. Again, if it's 3 to 5 hours a week or even up to 10 hours, it's such a huge chunk of time when you could be doing other perhaps more impactful things, but you don't know it's impactful because you can't measure your impact because you have no time. So what I do find really fascinating, though, sort of slightly digressing, is when it comes to what we're measured on as a communications function, employee engagement is right up there. That's sort of the #1 success indicator for communication. So if the way that the function is judged on effectiveness is engagement, how are we ensuring that everything that we measure and act upon sort of ladders back up to that kind of engagement factor? So how can our tools and our technology sort of support engagement and then measure it? So, when it comes to that effective measurement piece, getting your goals right and also working out why you're measuring what you're measuring. So it's not just for fun, it's to make sure that we're kind of hitting that success indicator, that engagement. That's what's really going to help.
Yeah, obviously that's such great points. The time and resource, I feel like anyone in any industry could probably relate to that, right? And the discussion around being able to measure impressions versus impact, that's always, a fun topic too to dive into. But the next thing that we looked at in this survey with all of our IC comms professionals, we wanted to explore a little bit around time and frequency. So kind of the frequency of reporting and then the effort that was put into it. So we found that respondents found it difficult to strike a balance between the time they spent measuring comms initiatives and the frequency of measuring. While many deemed measurement a necessity, most people were reporting monthly or quarterly, with 1 to 2 times a year being the second most popular measurement cadence. Sharon, do you think there's a gold standard or best practice here to use when measuring the effectiveness of employee communications?
Yeah, don't we wish that there was? So I think this is the question that I'm sure is on everyone's mind, sort of like, what's the silver bullet? What's the prescription for your measurement ailments? And, we heard this in State of the Sector too. What was really interesting is 85% of people said that they want to measure more often, more comprehensively. So, even if it does take us 10 hours, it's weird that sort of overwhelming amount of people that are just striving for this quality measurement. They want to do it more, they want to do it better. but actually only 15% were happy with their current cadence and effort levels. So if we look at the Haiilo report, which suggests that, you know, there's a monthly or a quarterly kind of average, I mean, it's fair to say that maybe not everyone's pleased with that. They want to measure more. So sadly, there is no magic number, and I'm sorry. I hope that's not what you came for. Can't prescribe it. But it's really what works for you, because every organization is different. I guess the key, and what I would always advise, is to only be measuring as much as you can action. So there's no point in saying, hey, our employee is satisfied. If that feedback comes back and says, oh, they're not satisfied, and you're not acting on it until next year's survey, you know, it's a long time for employees to be waiting for improvement. So, you know, if you measure every day, you're going to get very fickle kind of measurements. It's going to be quite changeable. If you measure every year, that's a long time for people to be waiting around. So that kind of balance between that transient feedback, but also having enough time to be impactful, that's the balance that we've got to strike. And sort of, as you said, Keela, that kind of monthly or quarterly cadence seemed to be the most popular. But I think what was really interesting out of this, the early sort of data coming out of State of the Sector this year, is that there's 20% of respondents saying that they actually, when we look at how frequently they measure, they're saying they measure always on. So they have a dashboard, they have a tool and technology that will actually show them all the time. Whenever they check it, they don't have to go and pull a report, they don't have to go into Excel and like look at all that. They're always measuring reach and attendance. So when you think about reach, that's about how many emails are being opened, how many visits are you getting to your site, how many click-throughs and that sort of thing. But actually, when it came to looking at understanding or behavior change, that drops down to about 5% using that always on dashboard. So there is, again, this sort of measurement gap between knowing how far our comms are going and knowing how impactful they are. So while cadence is one thing, it's important to get a cadence that feels comfortable, but also be looking at the quality of the measurement that you are pulling as well. So what data are you collecting, not just how often? And I think that that's going to be the kind of magic recipe, is to doing what feels comfortable for you, but what you can act upon at the same time.
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea of kind of measuring or marrying measurement then with action, and even the bandwidth that you have to do that action. Yeah, that's a great starting point. And then of course, you know, when we're discussing about how often people should measure, the part that always comes into it is efficiency and easier measurement, of course, is that it would, you know, take less time and resources to do that. So everyone would definitely like to make measurement easier, but many of the survey respondents found that, or identified, shortcomings in helping them to do so. A lack of understanding of available tools was one that was highlighted, such as attribution and data sources. Gaps were also identified on how pilot measurement initiatives can test what works before scaling up. Sharn, in looking over the shortcomings that we uncovered, and perhaps even in early reports of the State of the Sector, how do you think we can make measuring easier and more meaningful to be able to do it in a easier cadence that works for the organization?
Yeah, definitely. And obviously, like the biggest chunk here, biggest slice of the pie, is investing in tools and resources. So 1 in 5 saying that if they could do one thing to make things easier, they'd invest those tools and resources. And again, that was our top 3 challenges. So if you sort of solve that tools and resources issue, you'll also help your time and resource issue. But in terms of kind of making it easier and more meaningful, you know, it really is that sort of my advice, thinking back about what are we actually here to do. So as communicators, what is our purpose? What is our intention for the organization? Because there's no point in measuring if you don't really know what you're doing. What direction are you heading in? And so this can be anything from like increasing engagement, or aligning employees with corporate strategy, or actually reinforcing culture and belonging. And these are the kinds of things that we ask communicators in State of the Sector. But once you have that kind of purpose and direction, and as a communications function, you're aligned in what you're trying to achieve, it's really about starting small. So if you want to be like thinking about how can I do this easily, really just sort of setting a goal. So I want employees to better understand their benefits, for instance. So when you think about how you might test their current understanding, how well you want them to understand, and that kind of gap in between, how can you sort of test as you go? What might help tell you that you're measuring right? So obviously tools and resources, But if you don't have the tech, if you don't have the tools, could you ask a few random employees face to face? Like, did you hear about the benefits thing? This anecdotal evidence can start to help you build a picture. Could you put a quick poll on your intranet, or ask a question to the masses sort of on your employee platform? And maybe just sort of mine the search data. So if you're looking at your employee benefits portal, what are people searching for? Can you look at what their search queries are and help to build a picture of what they maybe don't understand? So I guess everything is data. Quick and dirty is better than nothing. But when it comes to easier and more meaningful, it's starting with the meaningful and working back from there. Keela, thoughts?
Yeah, no, awesome. That sounds, I mean, it's definitely a blueprint, one that people can enact on. Those, always tricky, right, with the lack of tools and resources and a lot of things that they highlighted. I think even as we dive into kind of the next piece, the next topic that we looked at in this survey with trust, right? I think when we think about meaningful measurement and making things easier, and understanding even why we're doing it or what we're doing it for, I think that really highlights, the kind of buy-in from senior leaders that that internal comms professionals are always looking for, to be able to invest more in those tools and resources, right, to make the measurement easier. But then they also have to measure to be able to prove their value of what it is that they're doing, right? So it's kind of a double-edged sword trying to find that nice balance. And we really did want to explore exactly, what internal comms professionals really thought about from a trust perspective, going both ways. So we did find that communicators in many ways feel the burden of proving their worth to senior leaders. But at the same time, senior leaders also need to know how trusted they are. So our data found that proving effectiveness to leaders was the most popular use case for measuring impact and success. And the key to getting leadership to provide sufficient support for measurement was kind of that second piece of the puzzle. So Sharon, I believe you'll agree with me when I say that getting senior level buy-in on measurement initiatives is kind of key here. But what are ways that we can get that needed support for effective measurement to prove our efforts?
Yeah, for sure. And as you say, it kind of goes both ways, right? You need to prove yourself to communicate as communicators to leadership, but you also need leaders to sort of trust in you so you can do your job effectively. And I think definitely, like, when it comes to leadership and who we're accountable to as communicators, our findings in this Haiilo report are consistent with the state of the sector findings, right? So 70% of our, and I think in the Haiilo report was 100, but 70% of respondents told us that they were using measurement to prove their value to leaders. So that's like the top use case for collecting data, is that kind of proving the return on investment. But on the flip side, what was really interesting in this year's data coming out is that 26% of communicators, so 1 in 4, is saying that there's no interest from the business is the top challenge for measurement. So there's this real gap between, I have to prove myself as a communicator, but actually, you could extrapolate it to perhaps like 1 in 4 leaders just don't care, which is such a hard thing to overcome, because we know that sort of the skinny bit of the funnel on the last slide there was for self-satisfaction, right? 85% of us want to do more measurement, and 6.5% of us, our use cases for self-satisfaction. And particularly for me, I love seeing the numbers add up, right? I love measurement. I love seeing the impact. But really, I think when it comes to getting that senior leadership support, it's thinking about, what do leaders care the most about? So going back to the purpose of internal comms and thinking about your success indicators, is it employee engagement? Why do leaders care about employee engagement? Well, we know that there's stats that support higher engagement leading to higher productivity, higher profitability. So, you can extrapolate that leaders are going to care because it's hitting the bottom line, right? So once you figure out what figures matter to them, that's how you can start to kind of connect your measurement and your metrics improving to what improves sort of the business along the way. So figure out what matters to leaders and work to that. That, I think, is my best advice in this case. Anything to add, Keela?
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, and even if we bring it back a couple slides, right, where we're talking about kind of finding that best measurement cadence, so that you can also enact, in the organization, right? Because it's not just about measuring to say you're measuring, it's more about measuring then to also act upon it and help form your strategy, in the particulars of how you're communicating, how you're getting those messages out. If we then go back to to, the key points in here. And then we really think, well, what kind of data will the senior leaders want to look at, right? Will it be that engagement data? Will it be how we can then impact the organization, make strategic change, and all of those sorts of things? Again, I think it's a really tough spot for comms professionals to be in, though, trying to prove their value and then also gain that trust to make those strategic decisions, and then also invest in great employee comms tools like the Haiilo platform that allows you to have easier measurement, pull that data easier, quicker, more efficiently, and really prove your value, right? I think that the chart that we had with the pie graph, where it breaks out exactly what is kind of holding people back, and tools, investing in tools and resources is number one. I think it always will be, unfortunately, but I think investing in the right tools, though, in my opinion, that's kind of the key, right? Because every tool is not kind of a one size fits all bucket, right? It's really finding that tool that can help you pull the measurement data that you need, that the leadership's looking for too, that they'll find all of your comms engagements valuable.
Exactly. Love it.
Yeah.
What's next?
All right. That's the golden question.
It is.
Yeah. So I really appreciate this conversation, Sharon, and this deep dive into all the findings that we did get in this brief survey. Also really excited to see how the state of the sector kind of builds upon this, and it's kind of the gold standard, let's be honest. So really, really excited to see what it tells us in terms of measurement. And if I do want to state really quickly, if anyone has any questions or interest, or just want to say something in the chat with us, go ahead, drop it right in. Someone did ask about accessing the actual report. We will be sending that out following the webinar, along with a link to access the some of the early results from the state of the sector. So that will be very, very awesome. So yeah, just to kind of wrap up the couple slides that we've covered so far, we just want to share again. So this survey has helped us uncover how today's workforce is struggling with proper measurement practices. We did find that measuring the effectiveness of internal communications can absolutely be a difficult task, but that's due to a number of factors, including a lack of clarity on meaningful measurement, a shortage of effective tools, and difficulties in obtaining qualitative data. So Sharon, what did you find as we kind of wrapped up all of these findings? What did you find were some of the top tips to maybe, help connect your workforce through meaningful communication, while also then enhancing communication practices or measurement practices?
Yeah, so obviously, as we've explored in the data, there's a huge gap between what we want to do and what we are doing. And I think in terms of kind of top tips, or the remedy for that is perhaps sort of these 5 kind of big buckets of ideas. So I think number one is getting laser focused. So you really need to work out, what is your purpose? What is your success indicator as a communicator? And working back from there, what are your objectives? What are you trying to measure? And how does it sort of hit the bottom line of the business? Like, why should the business care if your communications are good or not? How does that affect the business? So once you're clear on objectives, it becomes a lot easier to know how to measure them. So that's number one. Number two, harness the power within. So you have tools and resources at your disposal. So it may not be the best tools that you want, you may not have Haiilo yet, but don't overlook that kind of untapped potential of the communication sort of platforms, data sources, all of those sort of measuring points that you can pull together. So figure out what you are already measuring, and then work back from there how you can connect it to what you're doing in communications. Number 3, talk to the people. So engage with employees, engage with stakeholders, and really uncover their communication preference and pain points. So don't guess. Don't guess what you think people are saying or doing or what they're understanding. Go to them and talk to them. So data is one thing when it's quantitative. We love having reach measurements and opens and click-throughs, but also understanding sentiment and feeling and pain points. So can you talk to people? Can you kind of mine that data and work out kind of what the undertones are that are going on? So think about how you can, capture all of that by actually speaking to people. Number 4, starting small but winning big. So piloting measurement initiatives and test what works. So not everything's going to work all of the time. And sometimes we need to start with quick and dirty measurements. So they're not the most scientific. It might be going and talking to 10 people and doing a straw poll, but making sure that we are almost proving the measurement like measuring the measurement almost is what I'm trying to say. So proving the impact and the feasibility of different metrics and how they might be connecting to the bottom line. So try it, iterate, work on it, and sort of scale up as you go. And finally, number 5 is uniting for success. So collaborate with other departments, tap into their expertise. You might need to talk to IT, you might need to talk to HR, you might need to talk to learning and development department. Find out what they're measuring. Can you connect the dots? Can you align your measurement efforts? Because it could be that one measure might help you and another department as well. So think about how you can kind of break down those silos and create that consistency across the organization, that kind of singular measurement dashboard view. So that's my top 5. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I just want to reiterate, I think that the key point there from your top tips, Sharon, if you will, really start small, win big. I think in this survey, we explored a lot about, kind of the pain points for IC professionals, and there's a lot. There will always be a lot, but being able to really start somewhere, right? So we could talk about the lack of resources, the struggle with figuring out the right cadence, getting leadership buy-in and so forth, but it's really just kind of starting small and trying to scale up from there. So really, really love that tip. I think that really drives it home. So yep, just to reiterate, if anyone does have any questions, please feel free. You can send them and even anonymously through the Q&A if you would like to. We do have a few that came through during the presentation, so just quick touch upon them now. Sharon, I think this first one would be good for you. So my leadership is always asking me for stats from our messaging to prove people are seeing it. Is there a best practice to report on impact instead of impressions?
Oh, that's a good one. It's the age old. So I think we said start small, right? So we're not bagging it, but like anything that is kind of reach or impressions is a good first indicator that you've kind of reached people. The next step is to see that kind of understanding through to kind of behavior change through to outcomes. So what is your message about? I think that would be my question. So stats from your messaging, if your messaging is, I want everyone, and this is the worst example ever, but I want everyone to start using the recycling bin in the office, right? We know that they put the recycling bin there. Are people using it? So you can see that 100 people have opened the email, but is the recycling bin more full? When you ask like Jimmy in the corridor, oh, have you been using the recycling bin? Maybe policing that bin. Is he using it? What does he say? So thinking about the next step, so not just sort of the outputs and measuring how many people are opening and reaching, but the outcome. So how is that then going through to connect to behavior, to understanding, and then to action and bottom line for the organization?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love that recycling bin anecdote. So we did touch upon this quite a bit. Do we have any other wrap-up thoughts though on what seems to be the best balance for how often you should be measuring and proving your value of your outreach? Kind of that age-old, like how often, and also prove it and also provide action.
I knew it was the question on everyone's list. I think, yeah, so the report showed, I think between monthly and quarterly was like the kind of average. But as we know, we've got people all the way through from like never measuring to annually measuring to sort of measuring constantly, that always on. But really it is about what feels comfortable for you, because you need to be consistent. I think when we know sort of what our baseline is and we're constantly checking on our progress, we need to be doing that in a cadence that fits our work day. So there's no point in committing to measuring every day if you literally don't have time. So it's whatever you can consistently do and whatever you can action and follow up on. So too frequently, you'll never be able to action, and too infrequently, and employees will never see the change that you're kind of using that measurement to make. So yep, it's going to take some trial and error, but keep trying.
Absolutely. I'm happy to take this one, and then Sharon dive into if you have any thoughts. Jumping back to senior leaders putting trust in IC professionals, any tips on strategies that can be used to show their trust is valued? So I think, as we kind of already discussed, gaining trust from your senior leaders is a really great thing to have in your role, but showing that trust is valued can be a bit tricky to convey back. I would say that IC professionals have always had to strike a nice balance between pushing for a seat at the table and being in simply a role of order taker to push everyone's messaging out. I really do think that there's a great opportunity right now for those in the communication profession to sort of have this evolution and change the trajectory of where they are in the pecking order. You know, if we think back the last few years, you know, huge praise to IC professionals. During the pandemic, anyone in internal comms very much kind of served the company's needs and took a lot of orders from many different departments to get their messages out, and very swiftly, and did, you know, a bang up job doing it. IC having a seat at the table has always been a discussion, though now with them working hard to prove their value through measurement, they can kind of show their worth through marrying those comm strategies with other goals, like we had already touched upon, but even more so, you know, employee well-being, DEI initiatives, communicating change management, and even more as we enter 2024. So they can take on more of a bold role around a plan, aligning with organizational goals and focusing on quality over quantity to prove the impact of that measurement. And with proper measurement, that proves you're moving the needle and gaining that trust from the top down. So again, so many pieces to the puzzle, you know, but there's always kind of that tricky strike a balance between proving your worth and getting that trust to really take strategic direction. Did you have any additional thoughts, Sharn?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting hearing you talk about like strategic versus order takers. We did ask a lot of questions around that in this year's State of the Sector. So we'll find more out when we've finished analyzing the data. But you know, definitely what you were saying about kind of gaining that trust versus you know, reacting. When I think about like the last few years and thinking about, you know, communicators being that kind of pivotal connection piece between the organization, having to do so much, I think there's definitely something to be said for being very, very clear on your purpose and being able to communicate that to the leadership. So once you say, this is what we're here to do, and communicate that to leadership kind of with your measurement or your business case or whatever, but if we're here to, you know, connect people to strategy and we're not going to do things that don't align with that, it makes you much more sort of strategic, and it does really kind of narrow down what you're spending your time and resource on, and it makes it so much simpler, maybe not easier in the first instance, but simpler to kind of get done what needs to get done, because you're going to know what's the most impactful in sort of achieving that purpose. So definitely a balance to be struck. But the real key for communicators is how can they grease the wheels? How can they help leadership do what leadership needs to do? How can they help them, you know, achieve the organization's goals, because that's really what the value is for communicators.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So if anyone has any further questions, I'll say, please don't hesitate to reach out to Sharn or I. We will be sending an email following the webinar that you could connect with us on LinkedIn, shoot us some emails back with some questions. We'd love to continue the discussion. And, you know, just to wrap this up, just as we're talking about the evolution of the IC field, I'd like to reiterate that now is definitely the time to act very boldly. There's new ways to work, acquiring that require new approaches to communication. So if you want to learn any more about how you can reach, engage, and understand your employees, please do visit haiilo.com and learn more about how our platform can help your measurement practices. And again, in the email, we'll also send a link to access some of the early findings from the State of the Sector, which will be very exciting and exclusive for you guys. And you could scan the QR code and do it right now if you'd like.
I feel like a TV presenter.
There you go. Yeah, right. Here you go. So back to you, Paige.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to Keela and Sharn for providing this learning opportunity for us today, and to our sponsor Haiilo for hosting this webinar with IBC. A recording of this webinar will be available on IBC Advanced this week. And if you have any suggestions for future educational content, please complete the survey at the end of this webinar. And thank you all for joining, and I hope you have a great day.
Thanks all. Bye.
Thank you.